Hey, welcome to the garden. Today we're going to talk about tomatoes. Now tomatoes are, as far as the vegetables go, they are the most popular vegetable planted by home gardeners in North America. Because when you talk to people, if you ask them, do you plant a garden, what they'll say is, well, I plant a couple of tomato plants. And for the most part, what they do is they go out and they put them in a pot, or they'll dig a little hole and they'll stick a tomato plant in there, and they'll hope for the best. But there are certain things that you can do to increase your yield of tomatoes. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you some of the ways that we use to make sure that we get the tomatoes that we want. First of all, what you need to do is you need to make sure you have good tomato seeds. Now, some of the companies that sell seeds, the seeds are not so good. The ones that we use is Baker Creek, Johnny Seeds, M.I. Gardner, and sometimes Haas Tools. We find that the seeds that we get from them are always consistent. They're always good, healthy seeds. And when you start your plants in the house, if you have a weak plant, don't waste your time on planting a weak plant, because it's not going to produce for you, and it's just going to take up space, just be wasted space. So what we're doing today, we're out here in this raised bed, and what we've done, now we've started these from seed. They're indeterminate tomato plants. They're heirloom tomato plants. And indeterminate means that you're just going to keep growing. They're just going to vine and vine. And a determinate tomato plant only gets so big, and then it just stops. So, and we prefer the indeterminate kind. So what we do is, and I'll show you this later, we're going to plant a couple of tomato plants out here. But you can see here what we've done is those tomatoes over there, when we planted those, we put an egg in the bottom of the hole. And the ones over here, what we did was we put fish in the bottom of their hole, their planting hole. And so, what did you say?
A sardine. Yeah, tell them what kind of fish.
Yeah, it was a sardine. Fish are fish. I mean, if we find sardines are easier to use because they're dirt cheap. You can get them for less than $1 a can, and that just works for us. But you can see by looking at these plants how healthy they are. But once we dig the hole, we put the sardines or egg in the bottom, and then I take this twine and I lay it in the bottom of the hole. And then I run this twine up to this wire that I have run between these fence posts. And as the tomato vine grows, we'll just wrap it around this twine like this, and that will brace the tomato. But anyway, now after your tomatoes get this big, what you want to do is you don't want any of your leaves touching the ground. So what I do is I take scissors and I cut these off. You see, I'm cutting that, and whatever I cut off, I throw out of the garden. This one doesn't need to be here. Cut that one off. And this side shoot here, that doesn't need to be there. So we'll cut that off. And now these suckers, well, not the suckers, but these leaves, you can see where they're hitting the ground. What I do is I cut them off. So they're not touching the ground. You don't want anything touching the ground, because if it does, it's just a place for mold to start, and you can tell where this limb is going to end up touching the ground. You don't want that. And eventually what you're going to do is you're not going to have any foliage from about a foot down. I'll go ahead and cut this one off. And then after that, you look at these suckers. And a sucker is the growth that comes out between the main stem and another branch, like this. And you can either pinch them off or cut them off. I prefer to cut them off. And what that does is, if you leave them grow, it turns into a big bush like this, and it restricts the airflow, and it just it gives a pathway for all the stuff that you don't want on that plant to come up in the tomato plant, and so you don't want that. I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. So that's what your tomato plant's going to look like. I'll cut this sucker off. I'll pinch this one off. Wrap that around there. And another thing, if you're planting in a raised bed, you want to make sure you put grass on your tomato plants, because you want to keep it'll hold the moisture in, and you don't want the soil to get really, really hot. And so now look at this pepper plant. Is a plant that my wife planted. She planted it, and here's what you do with a weak plant. You just take it out, because it's not going to work. It's going to cause you problems. And what happens is, these tomatoes, they're doing so well, they're stealing the energy from that pepper plant. So that pepper plant's not going to grow. Now, a lot of times people get very, very technical about these tomatoes, but what it is, you have a plant, you have a soil, and you're going to put fertilizer in that hole to get it started. And then you're going to come out here and you're going to prune it a little bit. After it gets about this high, you want to back off of cutting the suckers out, because what happens, as this plant grows and it starts setting fruit, when that fruit gets about the size of a golf ball, you want to fertilize it again. I use fish emulsion. You can use any organic fertilizer that you want to use. That's just my fertilizer of choice. And then you got to remember that as it starts setting fruit, the sun gets so hot. And remember, sun is not what ripens tomatoes. I mean, too much sun on a bare tomato is just going to cause tomato scald, or whatever they call it. Your tomatoes just get so hot they get scalded. They call it sun scald. And so you want to prevent that. And you can remember, probably, that some of the best tomatoes you ever got was tomatoes that when you came out to pick them, you would reach inside this bush and you would find these tomatoes that was just so, man, they were just so smooth and thin-skinned and deep red, while they were protected by the foliage. So you want to prune a little, but you want to keep in mind that those tomatoes are going to need a certain amount of shade also. And then as your tomatoes grow, when they're this small, some of them will start blooming like this. Now when the tomato plant is this small, I don't want these blooms to take the energy from the plant, so I just go ahead and cut them off. That's what I do. And now look at these holes. Right before we came out here, there was a squirrel out here. Squirrels don't bother the tomato plants, but they was in here looking for their nuts, I guess. You see them? So that's another thing. A squirrel will get after your tomatoes when they get thirsty. So you would do yourself a favor, when the fruit comes on, you leave a pan of water out here so the squirrels can get something to drink. And they normally will not bother your tomatoes. But those are healthy looking tomato plants. But now let me show you how. You see this tomato plant right here? You see what that looks like? Now I'm going to go over there and I'm going to work on this a little bit. cut this bloom off. I don't want that. The tomato plant is too young for that. I'll go down here at the bottom, cut that off, reach around here, cut that off. Now you see how this stem forks? I really don't know how to tell which one is the main stem and which one is not the main stem. So right now, I'm going to leave that alone because I don't know. But this, you see how I've created this void down here? And eventually I'll probably take this stem off and this runner off, but right now I don't want to stress the plant too much by cutting too much off of it. Because if you cut too much off of it at one time, it really stresses the plant. So, now I'm going to take you over here and show you how we plant tomato plants in just regular dirt. Now keep in mind, we don't buy compost for these beds. For one, you don't know what's in that compost. We normally make our own compost, and it works well for us. It defeats the purpose if you pay $500 for a load of compost in here for these beds and you're trying to grow tomatoes to save money. It just doesn't make sense. This is just not going to happen. But there are different ways that you can amend your soil. But that's for us. Now let's go up here and I'll show you how we plant tomatoes in the regular ground. Now this is a plot. I spaded it about a week ago. Last night I came out here and hoed it, just the way they used to do it back in the olden days. And we got 2 tomato plants that we're going to plant. And these are from seeds we got from Baker Creek. And they were started in this container and we've left them in this container, and they're cherry yellow tomatoes. Seeds we got from Baker Creek. Looks like a healthy plant, but they need to go into the ground. Let me grab my tool. Just dig a hole. And last thing that we had planted in here was grass. But this is the way people used to plant tomatoes before all the mulch and all that stuff was being used. This is the way old farmers used to plant their tomatoes. Well, not farmers, it was normally the farmers' wives that did this, all right? So what I do, I get that a little bit deeper. Dig that out real good. Take a can of sardines, open them up. Try not to get this on you because it is a stinking mess. See that? Dump them in the bottom. Now you want to get rid of this can because it will attract all kind of varmints. Take a little bit of dirt, put it over them fish. I'll tell you, I read about this when I was a kid. That's the way Indians used to plant their vegetables. Now I'll take this tomato plant, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to plant that up to about here, because the deeper the better you plant tomato plants. See, look at them roots. See the roots? I'll loosen them up a little bit, like that. There's my dog, see? My dog smells them fish. Yeah, that's the way it is. You can see he's licking his lips. He wants them. You can't have them. Just take the dirt, put it back over this tomato plant. Press down a little bit. You don't want no air pockets. You take the remaining part of the dirt, just put it up here like this. Now, this is the way they used to do it in the olden days. Now, we got 2 dogs out here. Man, they smell that stuff. They want that. So what we're going to do now, go down here. I'm going to dig another hole. Let me get me a hand shovel here. We'll dig this other hole here. Yeah, look at that. Years ago, on farms, normally the women, the farmers' wives, had the job of taking care of the vegetable garden. And they did all this. I'm trying to convince my wife of that. So on this one, I'm going to take an egg. Drop it in the hole, take this thing, crack it, take my tomato plant. Look at that. Look at that beautiful plant. That's Baker Creek for you, see? Yeah. That is, that's just the way you want them. I'll bend over here, take this plant like this, put it on, put a little dirt on top of that egg. That. Push this dirt back around that tomato plant. Oh man, them sardines smell good. Whew. But you've seen what they do when it comes to growing tomatoes. It's great. See, now what you do after you get that, look at that dog. He's just waiting. He wants to lick that can. I'm not going to let him. So what I do now, I take a little bit of Epsom salt, and this just helps the development of them roots. Sprinkle some out there like that. Grab my hose and I'll water this in, and this will be the only time I water this plant up around its stem. I water it around its stem this time. And any other time I come out here to water this, the way I'll water it is I will water it out here, away from them plants. If I water this way, them roots will reach towards that water. Even if you water over here, them roots are going to grow towards that water. It's just the way they are. They'll grow right over towards that water. They'll get everything that they need. So, that's the way we plant tomatoes. We always have a good harvest. And we don't grow a ton of tomatoes. We grow what we eat. And 20 plants do us good. As a matter of fact, let me show you some plants over here that has nothing on them. Now, keep in mind what we showed you the first time. Now, these plants were planted in the ground with no fish, no eggs, no nothing, just in dirt. And you can see how they're growing. They're the same kind of tomato, and this is how your soil fluctuates. Big plant, small plant, bigger, same size, but they're not near the plant that those plants over there are. But still, they're going to produce good tomatoes. I mean, they'll produce good, healthy tomatoes. And the thing about tomatoes is, when you get a tomato, what you want a good, medium-sized, firm tomato that's good in salads, or it's good on hamburgers, and it has that good tomatoey taste. What we found, the bigger tomatoes, because look at the dog. See the dog? Get away. Yeah. The dog loves sardines. They all do. Anyway, when you get this hyped up fruit that's bigger than what it's supposed to be, you sacrifice so much taste, and the vegetables actually get what they call pithy. There's a lot of meat but not a lot of flavor, and we don't want that. So we just want a naturally grown, medium-sized, deep red tomato. Okay, that just about wraps it up. So don't be afraid to hit the subscribe button. If you like it, hit the like button. And we have more videos coming out. I think you'll like it. So you all be good, be nice, have a good day.